I never thought I would be the type of person who would even entertain something so out of line, but life has a way of showing you your weakest points when you least expect it. I've been married long enough to know what comfort feels like, but comfort can slowly become distance without you noticing when it started. My husband and I share the same house, the same responsibilities, the same predictable routine, but it has been months since we shared more than that. His mind is always elsewhere, his body always tired, his words clipped and mechanical. Somewhere along the way, I stopped asking for attention because rejection became too heavy to carry. I had convinced myself this was marriage, this was normal, this was what everyone eventually settled into. And then, my step-nephew came to stay for a while. He's younger, polite, reserved, the type that doesn't demand space but blends quietly into the background. At first, he was just extra company around the house. He'd help with little things, offer to cook, or sit and ask me about my day in ways my husband hadn't done in ages. It was harmless. Or at least it seemed harmless. I noticed that I started enjoying the small moments with him more than I should have, the way he actually listened when I spoke, the way he seemed eager to make me feel noticed without even realizing. His hands stayed on my shoulders longer than they should have, hesitant but steady enough to keep me from pulling away. The pressure was uneven, his touch more careful than skilled, but what unsettled me wasn't the quality of the massage, it was the way it made me feel. Every small shift of his fingers sent a current through me I couldn't ignore. I told myself it was harmless, that I was overthinking it, yet deep down I knew this wasn't just a nephew helping his step-aunt. There was something unspoken in the air, thick and undeniable, and my silence was all the permission he needed to keep going. At first, I focused on my breathing, trying to keep my thoughts steady, but the silence between us grew heavier with each passing second. I could hear the faint tremor of his breath behind me, the way he paused as though questioning if he should continue, and each pause only drew me deeper into the awareness of what was happening. He wasn't touching me the way you would someone in your family. He was too careful, too lingering, and the trembling in his hands betrayed nerves I couldn't pretend not to feel. That nervousness made me want to see how far he would go, how long he would test the edge of something neither of us dared to name. I could have stopped it with one word, but the truth is, I didn't want to. My body leaned into his hands instead of away from them. The guilt that should have warned me felt muted by the rush of attention, the warmth of being handled with a kind of fragile intensity one hadn't felt in years. My marriage had turned into empty routines, but in that moment, every tiny brush of his fingertips made me feel alive in ways I had forgotten I could feel. That realization scared me more than anything else, because it told me exactly why I wasn't pulling away. When his touch accidentally lingered lower than it should have, he froze, waiting for my reaction. My heart pounded, but I didn't move. I let the silence answer for me, and in that silence, everything shifted. He must have felt it too, because his hands grew steadier, bolder, though still cautious. The line we hadn't spoken about was there, right between us, and we both knew we were standing on its edge. What terrified me most wasn't that he might cross it, it was that I wanted him to. The moment his hands slipped lower, I felt the weight of choice pressing down on me. Everything inside me screamed that this was the point of no return, that one word from me could still end it, but the silence I allowed to stretch between us told a different story. He didn't rush, he lingered, waiting, testing, as though asking for permission without speaking it. My body answered for me before my mind could, leaning into the warmth of his touch instead of retreating. That was the instant where hesitation turned into consent, where unspoken tension became something more dangerous. His hands grew steadier, less clumsy now, as though my lack of protest gave him confidence. The trembling that had betrayed his nerves was still there, but it carried a new rhythm, one laced with desire instead of fear. I closed my eyes, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want to face the reality of what I was letting happen. My heart pounded with guilt, but the sensation coursing through me drowned it out. It wasn't just the physical touch, it was the recognition that someone wanted me in a way I hadn't felt in years. That forbidden craving made every second more intoxicating. When he paused again, I turned slightly, not to stop him but to face him, to look directly into the uncertainty written all over his face. For a brief moment, we locked eyes, and in that silence everything we'd avoided saying was laid bare. He searched my expression for resistance, but what he found instead was surrender. I didn't have to say the words, the way I let him continue told him everything. The air between us grew heavier, the space shrinking until even the smallest touch felt like an explosion. My body betrayed me with every subtle shift, every quiet breath that begged for more even as my conscience whispered warnings I refused to hear. The truth was, I had already crossed the line the moment I allowed him to touch me without stopping him. What followed wasn't an accident, it was a choice. When I finally let go of the weight of resistance, it was like something inside me broke open. I was no longer thinking of right or wrong, of roles or titles or expectations. All I felt was the forbidden pull of desire, and I gave myself over to it. That night, with his hands trembling but determined, I stepped fully into what I knew I could never undo. When it was over, I sat in the quiet with a rush of emotions I could barely untangle. Guilt settled heavy in my chest, yet it was layered with something else I hadn't felt in so long, aliveness. I kept waiting for the shame to crush me completely, but instead, all I could think about was the way his hands had trembled, the way his hesitation had slowly transformed into certainty, and how I had let it happen without a single protest. I told myself I should regret it, but regret wasn't the first emotion that surfaced. What rose instead was a dangerous kind of hunger, one that whispered it would not be satisfied by pretending nothing had happened. The next morning, I tried to carry on as if life had not shifted. My husband remained the same, detached, distracted, absent even when he was in the room. Sitting across from him, I couldn't help but notice how easy it was for him not to see me, not to notice what had changed inside me overnight. My step-nephew, on the other hand, couldn't look me directly in the eye. His movements were careful, his words chosen with restraint, but there was no denying the tension between us had taken root. Every glance carried an unspoken question, every silence carried the weight of what we had shared. I told myself it had to stay buried, that it was a one-time crossing, a mistake never to be repeated. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The memory was too vivid, too alive in my body to be erased by logic. Even as I tried to focus on chores, conversations, the ordinary rhythm of life, the night replayed in my mind with relentless clarity. Each detail, from the first trembling touch to the final surrender, lingered as though it had carved itself into me. I thought guilt would be my punishment, but instead the punishment was knowing how much I wanted it again. The secret sat between us like a live wire, dangerous and impossible to ignore. I don't know if this will remain hidden forever or if the weight of it will eventually expose us, but one truth is impossible to deny: nothing will ever be the same again. That night was supposed to be a fleeting slip, but it became a fracture in everything I thought was unshakable. His hands were shaking when it began, but it's my heart that hasn't stopped trembling since.